Patterns are great, but I don't really have a desire to make my own patterns. I just want to make clothes that fit me. Does this sound familiar? Is this something that you have said when I've talked about pattern making and I'm like, yeah, pattern making is awesome. And you're like, I don't want to make my own patterns. I just want to know how to make clothes fit me better. Well, my answer is always, the more you understand about pattern making, the more that's going to help you with the fitting, because making fitting adjustments is pattern making. Now, what do I mean by that? That's what we're going to talk about today. Let's jump in. Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Trisha, your pattern nerd friend. I'm here to talk about pattern making. I know, crazy, right? First of all, welcome. I am the owner of Creative Costume Academy, and it is my mission to help people really understand the power of pattern making, eradicate this stigmatism that it has to be hard or it has to be taught in a certain way, really make it fun and exciting and something that everybody can use to their benefit if they are trying to improve on their sewing, improve on their fitting. This comes up a lot because I am talking a lot, obviously, about pattern making, but the number one thing I would say every single person on the planet, whether you sew or not, struggles with clothes that don't fit, because standards are not a thing. Everybody is unique. And then for those of us who have gone into sewing thinking that, okay, fine, forget what's in the stores, I'm going to make it myself so that I make sure that it fits me, and then it's still a frustration. I hear you, I understand you, I see you, and this is why I'm here to help. The number one thing that I hear when I start talking about pattern making, which is why I usually start talking about fitting nowadays and then transitioning into how pattern making can help you, is that people aren't maybe interested in making patterns from scratch. That isn't their desire. They don't feel that's necessary. They just want to be able to pull a pattern off of the shelf and pick the size that's close to them, they sew it up and it fits them perfectly. I would love that to happen too, but the reality is that's near impossible, especially for fitted garments. It is not the pattern maker's fault, it's not the pattern company's fault. We as humans, every single individual and every person is uniquely, wonderfully, beautifully, perfectly shaped the way that we are, but we are all different. So to try and standardize and make averages of things is really impossible. Like we can't make averages of things because we're not average. And it might work for some people. It might have worked when you were younger, and now as your body is changing, things are in different places and you don't know how to adjust for them. So really the fitting is the key to making well-fitted clothes, to making good clothes that fit you. But how do you start? Where do you start? How do you begin? My answer to that question is always, the more you understand about pattern making and making pattern adjustments and how patterns work, the more that is going to help you in understanding what you can do for fitting. Fitting adjustments, when you are making adjustments to an existing garment, or you're making adjustments to a mock-up or a muslin or a toile, that you're gonna then adjust the pattern and then go back and make the final garment. Even if you're doing a toile or a mock-up of a pattern that you purchased, if you are making fitting adjustments, if you are shortening the length of the body, lengthening the length of the body, if you are doing a full bust adjustment, if you are doing a small bust adjustment, if you're doing a round back, low butt, all those different adjustments that people find helpful. If you are doing any of that, if you have ever done any of that, even if you're just altering clothing, like you're taking in the sides a little bit, you're adding a dart, you're cutting it up and adding a ruffle, if you're upcycling, if that's your thing. If you are doing any of those things, those are all pattern making techniques. Every single one of them. All of those adjustments, taking in the side seams, that is a pattern adjustment. Full bust adjustment, absolutely pattern adjustment. Increasing length, decreasing length, pattern adjustment. Any of that is a pattern adjustment. So by understanding the fundamentals of pattern making. I'm not saying you have to be a guru. Well, first of all, that doesn't happen and without years and lots of time with experience. To just know the basics, the very, very basics, that is what's going to help you immensely understand what is happening when you're doing a fitting. The number one thing, if you're new to my channel, you may not have heard me say this, but I think it's even on my welcome video. When you land on my channel, I sing a little song about the almighty dart. I've got probably at least 90% of the pattern pieces you see on this wall have a dart on every pattern piece, because it is essential to contour the curves of our body. The way I like to look at fitting is I really simmer it down to the more you understand how the dart works and how you can move the dart around and what you can do with the dart and what the purpose of the dart is, which is the number one thing that I talk about when I start talking about pattern making. The more you understand about that dart and what it can do, taking off seam allowance, adding seam allowance, understanding how to walk your seams. Because anytime you make a little bit of an adjustment, you should go back and check the other pieces. So like if you're taking in your bodice here or here, you better also check what happened to your sleeve, right? If you have a sleeve that's attaching to the body that you've now adjusted, it's going to maybe need to match up. Now, if you are completely new and you know nothing and you're doing that in a fitting, even on an existing garment or trying to make those adjustments on your pattern and you know nothing about even the very basics of pattern making, it's going to feel very hard and very heavy. Whereas with just a few simple tips, just very simple, I promise, it's like, wow, that's crazy, so simple. Just with that little bit of understanding, it's going to make that step so much easier. You don't have to learn to make patterns from scratch. In fact, the way that I teach, we don't even start by drafting a sloper. I know that the majority of people, when they teach pattern making, they start by drafting your sloper to your measurements so that you have a sloper that fits you, and then you take that and then you learn, and that's super valuable. But in my world, I really feel like that's a hard place to start, and especially if you're not into making your own patterns, why do you need a sloper? Like if you are determined to use the patterns that you already have, which I get it, use the patterns you already have, then you don't need to have a sloper. I really feel like it's super helpful. It makes it so much easier to have a sloper, but instead I give my students the slopers. That's not what we're talking about right now. But what I'm saying is, instead of starting there, when I start teaching pattern making, I start teaching you about the basic fundamentals. There are basic rules that are in pattern making: move a dart, adding fullness, and contouring. Those are the three main ones, and they're all really based on moving a dart around, to be honest, and learning about a dart. Once you understand those three basic things and kind of really understand it and learn like the grain line and what that's about, and adding seam allowance, taking away seam allowance, those simple things, fitting is going to start to make a lot more sense to you. That's why I start there, because I am a firm believer that we start with the things that are going to help you the most, so that you can take that, go do something with it, and prove to yourself, oh my God, like just with that little thing, I was able to do this. Just with that knowledge, I was able to understand this better. And then you're going to be more excited to go back and learn more. The other thing, kind of going along those lines about learning those three principles is, and what I like is, because the thing that those three principles that I was just talking about, the move a dart, the added fullness, and the contouring, once you know those, it doesn't mean you can only do those on a full-size sloper that's made to your measurements for your body. No, you can take an existing pattern and apply those principles that you've just learned to that pattern and start changing it up, start changing, making fitting adjustments, start changing it up, the design, because these rules, these basic principles that you learn when you're learning with me, especially, and other pattern making teachers teach this as well, but when you learn with me, we start there, because that to me is the power, that you can take that and immediately start applying it to patterns you're already working with, to clothes that you're wanting to make fit you, already without having to draft your patterns from scratch. In effect, this is something that I always say, you don't have to make your own patterns from scratch to understand and to really benefit from learning pattern making. If fitting is something that you are struggling with, that you want to get better at, that you really want to devote some time to because it's frustrating to you, and that is your ultimate goal, is to have a wardrobe that fits you well, that you feel comfortable in, whether that's buying clothes and altering them, upcycling clothes, buying patterns that are in the store, fitting those to your body, or drafting patterns from scratch. Pattern making in all of those scenarios is going to help you so much understand what needs to happen to when you're in a fitting and you're needing to know what adjustments to make, how to make those adjustments, and doing them correctly in a way that's going to give you a result that you want. So in effect, fitting is pattern making. It's just used for two different sources. Actually, a friend, pattern making teacher friend, Project Patterns, Kate, she did a great post on Instagram the other day. I want to share this because this just came up for me, that there's actually two different ways to look at pattern making, or two different ways of using this knowledge for pattern making. And one of those is you use the pattern making knowledge that you learn to make designs, like to create a design that is in your mind or that somebody has asked you to create, and you use those techniques that I was talking about to create that design, to create that silhouette. It's more about design and proportion and how it looks on the body, and does it look like the vision that you have. That is one part of pattern making. And then the other part of pattern making is the fitting, is making fitting adjustments, making sure that that is proportionate on the body and makes the body look the best. The movement is there, and using that. But in both instances, still, it's pattern making those principles and understanding how patterns work, understanding the fundamentals, and really, there's only three. If that is something that you're interested in, I would highly encourage you. You don't have to become a guru. You don't have to become a pattern nerd like I am, but it will help you. It will open your eyes and make it like click. Oh, that's why, or that's how, or that's what I can do, even if it's just a few simple things. I hope that helps make sense of it. It's something that comes up a lot, and I haven't ever really taken the time to explain what I mean when I say pattern making is fitting, or fitting is pattern making rather. So I just thought I would share with you my thoughts about that. Now, if you're really curious about pattern making or you want to learn more about fitting, we do have a free pattern masterclass. That link is down below. I believe it's still running. If it's not running, then you're in luck. Our twice annual FITabulous Fit Bootcamp is about to happen. That is like the biggest fitting pattern party. You can join at any level. It is completely free. It is 5 days of learning how to fit and gain that confidence, learning the order of how to do a fitting, what you're looking for, how to make adjustments to your pattern, which is a big one. That one's always a hard one for people. And it's just honestly a whole lot of fun. So if this is something that you really want to learn more about, check out that link below. Join us for FITabulous Fit, our fitting party where we have a super fun time. There's people who join again and again and again because they just enjoy the process so much. Learn about fitting, get confident with fitting so that you can make clothes that you truly love. Thank you so much for joining for this week's Tricky Thursday, and I will see you next time.